I think the check in is.
We'll go ahead and officially call the meeting to order. Has the meeting been properly posted and the roll been taken?
Yes.
Thank you. Item number 2, our approval of the minutes. 2.1, our minutes from the April 3rd, 2023 meeting.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
The motion is
Somebody.
second. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Item number 3, our communications. 3.1 is the city planner zoning code memo, included for information only. And then I wasn't sure if there's any questions or not, but or did you want to highlight anything beyond just the informational memo? Oh, Kevin?
Mr. Chair, I would say, since we're gonna cover each element in the memo and additional agenda items,
We can certainly move forward.
That's what I was gonna say.
Okay, wonderful. If that's the consensus, we'll keep moving right along. Item number 4 is new business. 4.1 is consider exterior remodeling in the downtown historical overlay district for 328 East Walworth Avenue, Old Wisco.
Yep, so we're just bringing this to the planning commission because you guys are also our historical downtown committee. That would, basically in a nutshell. So this was something that it's on the side of the building and a little bit's on the front. In the memo packet there, they should have the pictures. The gas station that's kind of behind there has a stone that's similar to this. It's just a different color. But because it's in the historical downtown, I guess I just didn't want to make a unilateral decision by myself and have the approval from you guys.
I think it's great. Is it just gonna be this area that's sided, or are they gonna go up above there too?
I believe it's just the area that's sided.
Kevin?
there was a reference in the memo to windows.
Yeah, and the guy was, the contractor said he was gonna be here today in case you guys had any questions. But basically, in the past, this isn't, and I just included that because he mentioned he was gonna put the windows in. But usually when something's been, unless it's on the front part of the main drive going down, we haven't made a huge deal with that, if I remember, Mark, but I just wanted to bring it a part of this. Yeah, Kevin?
So it said additional windows.
Yeah.
Okay,
I believe,
you have brought that before us before, so like the yoga studio next to the post office, you brought additional windows.
And on top of that.
Right, in box and burlap, you brought additional windows, and my question is, do you know where the additional windows are gonna be?
I actually do not know exactly where they're going. He was gonna be here today. He still might show up, but, he knew about the meeting and he said he was gonna be here. I told him I was gonna give him at the beginning of it.
And I think at that point, you asked us to also, have a perspective about the additional window design. And we gave you wide latitude.
Right.
I think, and so in this case, that building is a high profile corner building where if those side windows are in the, so let's say front quadrant in front of the staircase, right? They should follow the same kind of dimension as the windows that wrap around, I would think. And I don't wanna hold this up because but I think there are cases where you have brought that to us before, and I think if there's a request that is deviant from those windows in the front, for that portion of the wall, you might wanna ask us again.
Okay.
But
Yeah, and and when I got all this information, it started
Yeah, I'm
out
not-
with just the stone. and
Okay,
then it
it's-
went-
I'm just saying.
Yep.
Any other questions for Tina?
And he did mention to me that in the picture that I have, the mortar color would be a little darker, but it's the same
Right.
stone, just with a darker mortar.
And it corresponds with the stone on it, 66, or BP now, I guess.
Yeah,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
gee, to springboard off from what Kevin was asking, I think it's important that the windows, at least in design, match the windows that are on the front of the building.
mhm. Yep,
But we don't know any of this.
yeah, and I can get the information from him, and if it's not if it looks completely different, I can bring it back to here again. So I guess the main thing is if we can at least get the stone, because I know they're trying to get that done before summer is in full force.
Yes, Kevin.
So I make a motion to approve the stone application and windows if consistent in design with the front. If not, they should be resubmitted to the design overlay district.
There is a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you. Item number 5 is a public hearing to review and possible recommendation, and I want to apologize in advance for trying to pronounce your name here, Kalan. I'm sure I'm not real close to that, but thank you for joining us. With that, I would open up the public hearing on 5.1, which is a request to consider a conditional use petition to allow an outdoor display land use at 832 East Geneva Street, tax parcel XAS 94F, located in the business local BL zoning district. Again, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing and start with staff. Does staff want to start or?
Yep, so we do have the applicant here today. This is, he's going for a U-Haul. And in my memo, it did say that, for the parking stalls, that it was, 200 square feet, and it's actually 300 square feet. So he would be required to have 10.5 parking stalls, which would be 11 parking stalls. And I don't know if you have any specific questions. The applicant is in the audience today. Yep, got a question.
So, there are 14 parking spaces. He's required to have 11,
Correct.
right? So he's in compliance in terms of the number of parking spaces. Do we have a definition for what a parking space is? So does Greg Kunis have 300 parking spaces at his Ford dealer? Or are they outdoor display elements?
Yeah, so I know that over at the dealership, they actually don't even have specific places where you have to have parking stalls. They've kind of outlined an area where they can.
That's not, you're missing my question.
Okay,
I think the provision of parking spaces is to provide for cars for indoor retail use.
correct.
And this is a display use, which removes parking stalls for use from a retail customer.
Correct.
Which would keep them underneath the threshold for the retail space.
Yes, for how many spaces of vehicles that he wants, because if he's got 14, technically has 3 stalls that he would be able to use for that section. And I believe when we checked, that area doesn't have a ton of easements for cross parking.
They do not have, they're
Right.
individual property
Yes.
elements.
Right. So to serve the inside sales of everything that he has, he would be required to, have that 11 spots.
So I don't understand why this is in front of us, frankly. Because a display unit is different from a parking unit, by what you just said.
Correct. So technically, if he has 13, I guess he could be asking for 2.
Which is a pretty small U-Haul business.
Yeah,
And then the second question is, isn't there presently U-Haul storage? I mean, U-Haul places at the hardware store next to it.
I don't know. I believe that U-Haul used to be there quite a long time ago, and then they left there.
There is one on Racine Street, there's U-Haul
Right,
there.
okay, so there's
Yeah.
none there, okay. So I don't understand how staff can make a recommendation to approve this when what you're basically approving, asking us to approve is allowing outdoor display that puts a facility under its required parking spaces.
Well, and we can restrict him as to how many spaces that we would allow him to. I mean, technically, if he has 2 extra ones, and then he only wants 2 spaces, but that's bringing forward what the applicant has brought.
So
To us.
those are my questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ken. Any other questions?
Well, Mr. Chairman, even on the, what's this called? Oops. Just pushed myself out. The picture that shows the parking stalls,
Mhm.
he's counting the stall on the other side of the parking, on the other side of the land. And
One is wrong.
there's no stall there to begin with.
On the other side of the land.
Oh, yeah.
Land.
Oh, the land.
The street lamp.
The sign, right on the other side of the sign, if you see it on where he numbered it, he put a number 1 right by the sign and there's not a parking spot there. If you look at the picture below, is I think what he's saying.
14, okay, yeah, I'm looking at the GIS one, and on that one, there's 14. Okay,
The
yeah, where
GIS
his
one.
number is, yeah, I was looking at the aerial view.
Yeah, the aerial.
The aerial view shows that there's 14, I guess where his number is on the 1, that's more of the lane.
And I would think that if he's planning on, I mean, that would be I would think that would be unacceptable to use that lane in the first place, but in Kevin's, reply, he doesn't have enough parking stalls to do this in the first place.
Well, he needs 11, he's got 14.
So he could have 3 U-Hauls there, that's all he could have.
Correct. In the applicants here, I don't know if 3 works for him or not.
It does work, I don't mind these spaces.
Did anyone have any specific questions for the petitioner himself? You're welcome to come up to the podium. I don't know if you want to add anything more beyond. The
Yeah, I
parking
could
issue.
use 3 spaces, and have 11 for the customer use. I can work with that.
And who's gonna police him if he decides to use 6?
I mean, I'm just gonna use 3, so.
Okay, you could say that about any situation.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it would fall under the zoning department to
Mhm.
police that.
Enforce it, yeah. Any other questions? If not, are there any other members of the audience that wish to speak on this issue at this time? Not, I would go ahead and close the public hearing then, and we'll move on to item number 5.2, which is again, consider a conditional use petition to allow an outdoor display land use at 832 East Geneva Street, tax parcel XAS 94F, located in the business local BL zoning district. Is there a motion?
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Yes.
Kevin?
I can't vote yes for this because as written, it makes the parcel, non-compliant with parking regulations.
You're talking about as the motion is printed.
Correct. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, would anyone care to?
We would
Amend
amend
it.
it, the three, so
Yes.
that would have to go to Deb if she
Yes.
wants
Okay, as amended.
to limit to three.
To limit to 3, sure.
I,
Second.
my second, I
Okay.
agree with her.
Alright. Alright, there's a motion, as in, all in favor of the motion?
He's aware of all the conditions for approval as well.
Yes.
The street lamp is on there, correct?
Just making sure. Yeah.
Well, should the motion also include those conditions?
I think, it's just making sure that you're aware
They
that
should.
the street lamp needs to be fixed.
Mhm.
Street lamp, yeah, I can get it.
And the buffer in the back.
Motion.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
Point of order there. Did the motion include the recommendations as stated in staff's?
Mhm. That was my understanding.
yeah, as well as the more specific issue related to parking and stuff.
Okay.
So,
Thank
is
you.
that, well, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? And it should be hopefully clear to everyone there what the motion was.
We're not voting on the amendment,
We're voting on the amendment.
just the amendment. Yeah, all right.
So all those in favor of the amended motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
No, I vote sorry.
So, okay. I think, wait a minute.
Yeah. Just give it to me.
Maybe we just have a roll call on that. I think it's.
Well, the motion is to allow this development to go forward with the 3 parking stalls
Right.
and the
And the
existing
conditions.
conditions.
Yes,
Well, no, the motion, what we're voting on is the amendment, not the motion.
Right, we're voting on the
Well,
amendment
Okay, start with the amendment. Okay.
as amended. So,
Gotcha.
The amendment hasn't been adopted.
right, so we gotta vote on
The
the,
amendment first.
right, yeah, that's what.
Sorry, that's why I said no. I'm doing that.
So, if everyone's clear, we're voting on the amended motion.
The amendment first.
Just the amendment.
The motion to amend.
That's what I was trying to say,
Yeah.
sorry. All in favor of the
Motion
amendment?
to amend.
Motion to amend, signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion, the amended motion passes, or the amendment passes, sorry. All those in favor of the motion now as
As
amended,
amended.
signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion passes. Alright,
Thank
you. Alright. Six, which is a public hearing to review and possible recommendation regarding Toronto Builders. A public hearing under 6.1 regarding the request to consider a planned infill development amendment to the official zoning map for a step 3 general development plan, GDP, at 1616 Hobbs Drive, tax parcel XCDB 3-5, located in the manufacturing light ML zoning district to allow for a group development residential apartment complex. Applicant Toronto Builders.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
per the recommendation, I move to lay over until our next meeting.
I second that.
There's a
Could you
motion.
please open the public hearing?
Okay. I'll go
And then
ahead.
don't close the public hearing.
Okay.
So you've got to go through the public hearing process.
So with that, I'll officially open up the public hearing on this issue. And now I think there's a motion.
Move to lay over until our next meeting, the public hearing.
Second.
Sounds good. There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Item 7, public hearing regarding possible recommendation for the city of Delavan, 7.1. It's a public hearing and request to amend section 23.206.7 from parent C pertaining to the communication tower land use and add communication tower as a conditional use in all zoning districts listed in section 22.105. Again, applicant city of Delavan. With that, I will open the public hearing.
Good evening. So as you probably noticed on your agenda, we have quite a few different zoning code amendments this evening. Most of these are pretty much tweaks to the zoning ordinance. Building and zoning staff suggested that this would be a great opportunity to kind of run through our to-do list of zoning cleanup items that we've been accumulating over the past few months prior to putting the code online, so we don't have to make as many changes once the code's up and online. I agreed. I thought that was a great suggestion. So a few of these amendments here, as you probably read, are responses to changes in state law or changes to case law that have evolved over the past few years. A few are just clarifications. You know, as Mike Slavny retired and I came in, I kind of looked at it with fresh eyes and figured I found certain things to be hard to follow. Maybe others in the future would as well. So I thought there was an opportunity for me to get some of my personal cleanup items in there too. So I'll I think as was suggested, we'll go through these each on the agenda item. So I'll try to stay on topic here. So this first item is pertaining to communication towers, or more specifically cell towers. So a little background on this one. A few years ago, the state did pass legislation kind of taking away local control over the placement of cell towers, unfortunately. So as a result, we've developed a model ordinance that we've been using with all of our clients to bring them into compliance with state law, but then also give the city as much control as we can have under the law to regulate cell towers. And so we've kind of worked with city attorneys that we know and have worked with about kind of making sure that you guys are claiming all the powers that you have available to you and regulating them and making sure they're providing you with as much information as you want before you approve these. Because of the changes to state law, we did have to make them conditional use, permit them by conditional use in all zoning districts. As you saw in my memo, we are allowed to limit the setback or impose a setback on these towers equal to the height of the tower. So and we were also able to impose a height limit as well. So the tallest tower we could allow, I believe, is 200 feet. And so a 200-foot tower being proposed would have a 200-foot setback requirement equal to the height of the tower. Fortunately, that means a lot of our residential areas, effectively, you can't have a communication tower in those locations because that setback would be prohibitive. So we've also included a 1/4-mile spacing requirement. So if the telecom company has a tower or there's another tower within a 1/4 mile, you do have some ability to deny based on that. What else should we say? We have pretty extensive application requirements so that you're clear on what's being proposed. Because it is a conditional use, there'd be a public hearing required where you can find out information that perhaps the applicant didn't provide. And we have found that just because they are conditional in all zoning districts does not mean you have to approve everyone that comes in front of you. It either has to meet all the built-in requirements, but you can also make a finding if you have substantial evidence that it's not appropriate in that location. So I think you still have a fair amount of leverage in this area. Last thing I'll note is that we did exempt City of Delavan owned facilities if they're for municipal purposes or emergency services. So this shouldn't get in the way of those essential communication towers that you need to have to run your city.
Yes,
I have a question, and we may have to go back to Mark, because he may be the only guy with the depth to answer the question. As I understand what we're looking at here, this also includes all communications, antennas, dishes. Do we still have Charter Spectrum equipment on the water tower?
We have their, well, they're remnants, but they are not on the physical tower. They're not utilizing the tower for their antennas. They just use a ground building. So no, they are not on our water tower anymore.
So, but the hardware is still up there?
The mounting hardware is still on the tower.
Well, does that leave me with one more question? We also, at that time, I think, not trusting my memory here, we required of the supplier some special dispensation on a channel for the city,
Long since gone.
long since gone.
Yes,
The requirement or the channel?
the state took that ability away.
Ah, okay, thank you.
Kevin?
So the agenda packet, your memo and the agenda packet and our spreadsheet, our present data have different references, so I'm gonna go to what I think is reference 15 on people's pads, which is the placement of towers on the roof of existing buildings must maintain a setback from residential zones or properties the same as the building setback required for the new building. That would seem to be in conflict with 14 that says the setback is required to be 100% of the height of a communication tower. So if I have a small building on a small lot meeting appropriate setbacks, I could put a tall tower on it and not have that required setback. Am I reading that incorrectly?
Let me look at that. You said it's on page 15?
No, it's
Item
15.
15 and 14. It's under
Page
regulations.
3.
In your memo, it was F2.
Okay. And that's cool. Right, so yeah, I think that would allow them to be closer than, if we're imposing a height of 2. If the height is 200 feet and the setback is 200 feet.
Yeah, that's item 14.
Right.
But if I place the tower on
On a
the roof of
building.
an existing small building with its existing
Mhm.
setbacks in line, it's cool.
I think you're correct.
we
I
should-
think some of those tall towers need to have their own structure, but I agree that you're correct.
Okay, so, thank you.
Any other?
I have another question.
Yes, Kevin?
On the fencing recommendations, which are item 29 in our pads. Oh, no. 29N. I just want a clarification. It says fencing, a tower may be enclosed by solid fencing not less than 6 feet in length or a buffer yard with a minimum opacity of 0.4, which is shrub every half, whatever, right?
I can look that up. Usually when they get higher in opacity, there is some sort of fence requirement. But it's a combination of physical width.
But so
Plantings
just
or
tell me
fence.
what the buffer, what
Yeah.
that means.
Yeah, so in your landscaping code, the buffer yard is defined by physical distance separation,
Right,
a certain number of plantings, and then depending on the opacity requirement, so a higher opacity requirement, often comes with like a fence requirement.
so point 40 would seem, because it says the minimum opacity of said buffer yard shall be increased to 0.80 borders of the lot abutting residential zone property. So, to me, the question is the fencing there to prevent access? Or is it there for, to improve the overall, look of the bottom 6 feet of a 200-foot communication tower?
And I think this is written more to improve the appearance of it. It's not really about security fencing, although that would be encouraged, but to answer your question, it's about aesthetics.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Any other questions for staff and commissioners? Yes.
So there's a provision in there to allow for municipal exemptions. Some of the residential components limit our ability to actually get coverage in residential areas. I know that driving through the city, we have black spots where there's just no cell phone. There's no connectivity to the existing service providers. That would give us the ability to put towers up, or would we need to have a utility in place to actually justify putting up those towers from a city perspective?
Good question. The way we have it written, it says, City of Delavan owned and operated facilities to provide for and maintain a radio frequency telecommunication system. So if you would have to tie it to, like the city activities such as police, fire, or other municipal services. So if you could tie it to that.
So it would need to be something pertaining to other municipal services. And when we're talking about a future plan for connecting the Internet of Things as our plan is identified, we're gonna need to do that or make that available for another vendor to be able to provide that resource.
My understanding now, I'm tiptoeing out of my area of expertise here, but the Internet of Things, 5G, small cell technology tends to be smaller, more distributed system. And so you probably wouldn't have a 200-foot tower.
Right.
And so let's say it's a 25-foot tower, maybe you could find a place to put that, because your setback would be 25 feet.
Or we could utilize the exemptions to place that strategically.
Yeah, I think you could do that too. if you needed to.
Jackie, isn't this saying that that structure has to be owned and operated by the municipality?
It does say that.
So it's not something to be able to turn over to a vendor to do.
No, but we could allow or lease the space to a vendor, because now that we own it, we could do different things with it.
That
Well, none of us are lawyers, so.
doesn't sound right, though.
Yes, this was not, I'll just say this was not written with like 5G in mind. It was written.
5G or whatever that happens to turn into in the future. The idea is to have flexibility that the city can adapt to, not restrict ourselves.
I'd say this was written to protect the city from telecom companies with giant towers. So if, as technology emerges, there might be a need to tweak this. Or if we know right now what we need to do to tweak it, we could consider that too.
Any other comments or questions?
Well, I have one more thing too.
Okay.
This is, because this is zoning, this is towers on parcel. So if there's 5G or anything in the public right of way, that's separate from this too. So that's another thing to keep.
All right, are there any other people in attendance that wish to speak on this issue at this time? If not, I would close the public hearing and move on to item number 7.2, which is consider amending section 23.206, parent 7, parent C, pertaining to the communication tower, land use, and add communication tower as a conditional use in all zoning districts listed in section 22.105. A motion.
So we,
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing and
Hold
hearing.
it, whoa.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I make a motion to amend the submitted language by striking item 15. The placement of towers on the roof of existing buildings must maintain a setback, which, that language would add, which actually provides for smaller setbacks than item 14.
Would that be in conflict with what the state is requiring here?
I have to look at that specifically, I'm not sure.
So I make a motion.
There is a motion. Is there a second?
The amendment, you mean?
Yeah.
I'll second the amendment.
There's a motion and a second to the amendment. Any further discussion on the amendment?
how does that impact buildings that would be taller than a small structure? If we remove that.
Well, they wouldn't be small structures.
Right, but if you were to put that on top of.
It says the setback from residential zones or properties is the same.
This is residential.
Right. So if you put a tower on a house,
Or an apartment building.
right,
But by removing that, now we would only have 14 to go.
right.
Is that more for like TV towers in somebody's house?
No, these are,
We have a separate land use for if someone has a satellite dish or an antenna on their private residence.
So, yeah, I wouldn't see why it would have to be in there.
it just looks like a potential way to avoid required setbacks on large towers to me. If there's an exception, point to the short towers, which aren't what we're trying to regulate here, then. I mean,
Okay, all right, I'm on board.
All right. Will, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I have a concern and question that our consultant's not sure that striking 15 from what we're doing here isn't in violation of what the state requires us to do.
she said she'll check on it, so we can act, and if she comes back and says, then we'll have to redo it, but it makes no sense to me now, Will. And you'll note in the rest of these, where where it corresponds to state statute, it says per statute, da-da-da-da-da-da. And there's no reference here. She also noted that this is their model ordinance that they've worked on with other municipal attorneys. So there's a equal case that this could be municipal attorney's perspective. So we can only act on what's in front of us, not with a guess of whether it's in statute.
But isn't that what we're doing, guessing what the state statute?
No,
may or may not
I'm
say?
telling you, it doesn't make sense to me, and so I want it struck. That's all I'm saying. You can vote no.
That wasn't my point.
So, any other discussion? Otherwise, we have a motion and a second on the amendment. We'll vote on the amendment first. there's no further discussion.
This also delineates, it's combining new buildings and the tower as one for the purposes of setback. If you didn't have that in place, is that gonna change the dynamic of the setback for just the communication tower? Is that gonna be added on to the setback of the building if this is removed?
So what it says is, the placement of towers on the roof of an existing building must maintain a setback from residential zone or properties the same as building setbacks required for new buildings. It has no reference to building a new building. It's saying what the setback requirement is. So if I have a legally set back residential building, I can put a 200-foot tower on it, it'll fail structurally, but per 15, I could do it.
As long as you put it on your building.
Right.
No, it would still need to meet 14.
No, it doesn't.
I don't see that.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't say pursuant to 14, it doesn't say required per 14. It says the placement of towers on the roof.
All those, is everyone clear on the amendment at this point? Okay. All those in favor of the amendment signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Next, we'll have, is there a motion on,
We already have a motion to.
yes. So all those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye as amended. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Item number 8 is the public hearing to review and possible recommendation against City of Delavan. 8.1 is a public hearing on a request to create section 23.403, parent 18, residential bulk standards to further clarify regulations pertaining to accessory structures, bulk standards, again, applicant City of Delavan. And so with that, I will open the public hearing. Jackie.
All right, so this is one that was mostly something that was my preference to clarify. This is not a policy change. There's rules in this chapter that state that your accessory structures can't be in front of the principal building for the most part. And that is, it's listed within certain, principal use bulk standards. But if you're looking for a garage setback, you wouldn't know to look for like residential, single family, and then find it in there. I just found that very counterintuitive. It is a footnote in the bulk table, which most people use as reference, so it's not totally impossible to find. But I just felt that if we added it as its own freestanding section, it'd be less likely to get missed in the future. And so that's my recommendation, is just to add a new section at the end, so that there's a nice header that goes with it. So if you're scanning the headers for what you're looking for, you'll find those rules about where accessory structures can be placed in the lot.
Any questions of staff? Seeing, hearing none, are there any other individuals in the audience that wish to speak on this issue at this time? Seeing, hearing none, I will officially close the public hearing and move on to item 8.2, which is again, consider creating section 23.403, parent 18, residential bulk standards to further clarify regulations pertaining to accessory structure bulk standards. Is there a motion?
I move as stated.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Item number 9 is a public hearing to review and possible recommendation for the City of Delavan. 9.1 is a public hearing on a request to create subsection 23.406, parent B, and amend section table 23.403 to allow for a reduced pavement setback for parking pads for single family and two family dwelling units, again, applicant city of Delavan. So with that, we'll open the public hearing. Jackie.
So this one is pertaining to our required pavement setback. So in every zoning district, we generally require that you can't pave closer, you have to paint 5 feet from the lot line. That's the setback for paving. That way you avoid accidentally paving over your neighbor's lot line if you don't do a survey. It also is good for impervious surface and stormwater. But we have been, especially in the more urban lots in the city, been seeing some issues with. We've got more adults living in homes, they all have cars and need places to park their cars. And there's a lot more demand for parking pads. And so this was a suggestion that we came up with to allow for basically an encroachment on the setback. So decreasing the setback from 5 feet to 2 feet for unapproved parking pad. You can see in the language we have here, we're really limiting it to the area that you need for the parking pad. So you can only encroach for about 50% of the length of that side lot line to accommodate the parking pad. You can't do it on both sides. It's got to be a licensed vehicle. And so it's basically a way to allow for a nice paved parking pad rather than having kind of haphazard parking over the lot, and to encourage people to comply with our ordinance rather than just kind of asking for forgiveness after the fact.
Good. Any questions of staff? Hearing none, are there any other audience members that wish to
Is this,
speak?
sorry, has this been a common practice in all cities to move from 5 feet to 2 feet? Seems awful close to me, to tell you honest truth.
I wouldn't say in every city. I will say in other places I've worked, we've changed. For example, in the city of Monroe, in their older neighborhoods around the downtown, they kind of unilaterally across the board just decreased the 5-foot setback down to 3 feet. But that would be for every lot around every side of the lot, whereas here we are increasing it or decreasing it more, but on a more limited basis, only to allow for that parking pad.
Thanks.
Did you have a comment?
I thought you were already closing the hearing. I was getting ready to talk.
Oh. If there's no other comments, and if there's no one in attendance that wishes to speak on this, then I would close the public hearing and move on to item number 9.2, which is consider creating subsection 23.406, parent D, and amend section table 23.403 to allow for a reduced pavement setback for parking pads for single family and two family dwelling units. With that, I would entertain a motion.
So
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Yes, Kevin.
So this seems, one, I think the present lot setbacks that provide for good distance between paved surfaces and neighboring properties are one of the positives of the single family lots and the dual family lots in the city of Delavan. It provides a sense of break and differentiation that you don't see in a lot of urban environments. But secondly, the change in the setback to me, without a change in the setback for like a outbuilding or stuff like that, means that we're gonna have weird concrete formations 3 feet wide near garages, okay, that are gonna be set back 5 feet. So I don't understand the usability of the feature. So I have a garage setback 5 feet. I can increase my setback on my driveway for 50% of that distance, I can either steal that 3 feet, steal is the wrong word, but use that 3 feet close to the curb, which isn't where I'm gonna use it, because I don't wanna park my car there, but I'm gonna do it by the garage. And so now I'm gonna have a half parked car next to my garage. I just think from an aesthetic standpoint, it's weird. I appreciate the fact that it says for licensed vehicles. The memorandum notes that people are complaining because they don't have room for their boats and they don't have room for their snowmobiles and stuff like that. I really don't know what the 3 feet buys them. I don't think if this is truly a homeowner problem, that this is the way to do it. And I think it kind of disturbs one of the features that I think is positive in the city. So that's my point of view.
Thanks, Ken. Any other questions, comments?
Right.
Yes, correct.
How can we decided on the 2 feet then? What made 2 feet the number instead of 3?
We talked about it at staff and settled on 2, but it could be 3 if we felt that it was too close. Would you want us to say where that?
Yeah. We had to pick a number, so that's, I guess, the start of it, but it was also, we felt that if you had 2 feet, you had 2 feet on each side, so there was at least enough green space for something to grow. And then it wouldn't, that it wouldn't for like grass. If you just had like a 1 foot strip or something like that, it most likely would have issues with growing. And then the other part with looking at this is, when you drive around Delavan, especially on certain streets and in certain parts of the town, we actually have some residents that actually have shared driveways that are connected to each other. Some of these people in the past, some of these driveways are probably 10, 15 years old. Some of them probably didn't come in for a permit and go through the proper process. And a lot of times the complaint that I get when I come to certain things is they're looking at their neighbors. Their neighbors have basically to the lot line or really close to the lot line, and then they come in and try to get something so that they can do it. And then because they're going through the proper channels, they can't even get a car on the side of their other house, which is, but we're just finding that a lot of times people have more than 2 cars, or they're wanting to have a third place to put a car on there. And we also figured with the 2 feet, you'd at least have a total of 4 feet, and people wouldn't be like banging, if there was a driveway that was 2 feet and 2 feet away, your car doors wouldn't be banging into the neighbor's car.
Are you sure the fence guys didn't tie it 2 feet?
Sure, what?
Yeah.
Fence guy. But, I mean, we can change that, but we're just, and it really just depends upon the setbacks. So most of our setbacks are 10 feet for a structure of a garage. So if we only had 2 feet, that gives them 8 feet to have a driveway, which you could fit a car on. If they only had like 1.5 foot, I mean, unless they're parking a motorcycle on the side of their garage or something, it really doesn't do them any good. So, but I think some municipalities have 3, some have, I think you have some that might have 1.
Yeah, I mean, I would recommend at least 2 or 3, just for the reasons you stated.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Yes.
I concur with Kevin and with Bruce. I think that 5 feet's just fine.
I mean, in the older sections of towns, obviously, the setbacks are a lot less than 5 feet, because that's where it was back then. So, I mean, if someone came and says, well, he's only 2 feet, why can't I be 2 feet? That's because it was before the ordinances were even established. But I think 2 feet, I personally think 2 feet is too close.
Honestly, that's where I'm at. 2 feet's pretty close. I know it's only another foot, but I'd be more willing
You go 3 or 4. But 2 is really close. Sorry.
I'm not sure that 2 feet allows for a lot of options in terms of fencing either. If you wanted to put something up close to the lot line.
Can you expand on that? What do you mean?
Well, 5 feet would give you much more of an option.
Can you put your fence on the lot line?
Yeah,
So how would,
That would give you more room to create more decorative or more intricate or bushes or other things like that by utilizing the extra space that's available. Without intruding on your neighbor's property.
you're just talking about green space? I don't understand the fencing part.
Well, there are options in terms of putting just something in between. But if you're gonna put fencing in there,
oh,
and if you wanted to, I don't know,
Catch it.
yeah. You just
you're
get-
saying it, 2 property owners each got within 2
So
feet.
if you wanted
Now we've
a
got a
buffer
steep
yard
strip.
with opacity without violating your neighbor's, yard 2 feet, as soon as I put up a bush, I'm violating my neighbor's yard. But if we wanna put up chain link fences between driveways, 2 feet's great.
This fits exactly with what you're talking about in terms of quality and a nice place to live.
Well, we have, everyone clear on, we do have a motion and a second as it relates to 2 feet, so if everyone is clear on that motion, I would ask,
I move to call the question.
yes, everyone, in favor of the motion signify by stating aye. Opposed? Aye. All right, motion dies. Is there another motion?
No, the item's settled, sir.
Okay. Then we will move on to item number 10, which is public hearing, review, and possible recommendation, again from the city of Delavan. 10.1 is public hearing on a request to amend section 23.408, parent 2, pertaining to substandard lot regulations, applicant, again, the city of Delavan. Jackie?
Okay, substandard lots. So substandard lot will be a lot that does not comply with your current zoning ordinance. So a lot of lots were platted before zoning. So oftentimes it means they don't meet minimum lot width or minimum lot area. Your current rules, which you've had on the books for quite a long time, state that any substandard lot could have a single-family detached dwelling unit, as long as it meets 75% of the requirements of the ordinance. Right now that is out of line with state statutes because state law basically said you can't limit it to single-family development. You just have to allow development on the lot that would otherwise be allowed in that zoning district, provided that it meets the bulk standards and other requirements, other city regulations. So kind of speaking abstractly, I would imagine that certain lots would encounter difficulty in meeting all of the setbacks if they were really small. And so that might preclude development on some of those smaller lots. But at the very least, what we need to do is strike the part where we're allowing only a single family development or single family home on these substandard lots.
Any questions? Yes, Kyle.
I have a question about comply with other municipal ordinances.
Mhm.
So if there was a setback requirement for the specific district and use, that would be in that municipal, that's referenced. So if I had a half-size lot, I would still have to maintain the perimeter setback, right?
Mhm.
So I'd have to build a small building, right?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, Kyle. Any other questions, comments? Seeing, hearing none, are there any others in the audience that wish to speak on this issue at this time? Seeing and hearing none, then I would close the public hearing and move on to item number 10.2, which is again, consider amending section 23.408 pertaining to substandard lot regulations. Any motion?
So moved.
There's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing, hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Item number 11 is a public hearing to review and possible recommendation, City of Delavan. Item 11.1 is a public hearing on a request to amend section 23.409, non-conforming structure and building regulations to address internal code inconsistencies and to clarify regulations pertaining to non-conforming structures. Again, applicant for the City of Delavan. And with that, I would open public hearing.
All right, so this is, this started out as a review of our rules for non-conforming garages. And then as we looked at it a little bit closer, we ended up giving a little bit of a facelift to the section that pertains to all non-conforming accessory structures. So basically that'd be a garage or a shed, or anything like that, that doesn't meet your current zoning rules. So we did a number of different things here. We clarified some of the language. Sometimes we said lawful, sometimes we said legal, non-conforming, and so we wanted to just clean that up to avoid any confusion for future interpretations. I added headers to the beginning of each section, so it's easy to understand when you're kind of scanning through, looking for the rules that pertain to your situation. When I did a close read of this, I noted that there's no, your current code does not address what to do if somebody intentionally removes a non-conforming structure. The code was silent on that. I proposed some language basically stating that if they were to remove 50% or more of the floor area, then they basically kind of lose their grandfathered status and need to build something that complies. But if they remove less than 50% of the floor area, they could rebuild as it had been constructed. What else do we have here? We, just to clarify for non-conforming garages, which is kind of the reason we got into this in the first place, decks and porches, so kind of the smaller structures, those are okay to restore as they were. So if someone has a non-conforming deck or garage, they could rebuild that as it was. We've also clarified the language for destruction by natural disaster, just confirming that, you know, flood happens or something like that, it's okay to replace your non-conforming structure. We clarified the rules for garage additions. So if you would like to, you have a non-conforming garage and want to make an addition to it, you can do that as long as you are complying with other zoning rules. So there's really no change to your current policy, just clarifying what that was. But we did have a conflict internally in that section where we said that you could get a variance if it doesn't comply with the setbacks, and we also said that you had to comply with all setbacks. So we're having a little internal struggle about what that meant, so we thought that would be a good opportunity to clean that up by removing that conflict. And then the last substantive change here is that we're saying, we're just clarifying that, actually, I don't think that's a change. Oh, here it is. For expansions, we're saying you need to get a variance if you're expanding it beyond what's allowed under zoning.
Any questions for staff? Kevin?
So I have just a textual question. In that section so there's like and this is referenced differently in different places, but there's a blanket conforming
Yes.
status section. There's a rationale item underneath that. Is that meant to be incorporated in the code?
Yeah, that is currently in your code right now. So yes, it is part of that section above it.
So it just needs to, if that's gonna stay in the code, it needs to reference the right number. It references 9 now.
Thank you. Yep, good catch.
Thanks, Kevin. Any other questions, comments? not, are there any others in attendance that wish to ask any questions or speak on this issue at this time? Seeing and hearing none, with that, I will close the public hearing and move on to item number 11.2, which is consider amending section 23.409, non-conforming structures and building regulations to address internal code inconsistencies and to clarify regulations pertaining to non-conforming structures. Is there a motion? So there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
The motion and second include the recommendation of Mr. Armstrong.
Yes.
Any other further discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Item number 12 is a public hearing to review and possible recommendation of the city of Delavan. Item 12.1 is a public hearing on a request to amend section 23.811 pertaining to permitted sign rules in planned infill development districts. Again, applicant, city of Delavan. With that, I will open the public hearing. Shannon?
Right, so this is a situation in which we noticed a conflict internally in between the sign ordinance and your procedures chapter where we describe the rules and procedures for planned infill developments. So in your sign ordinance, it says you may be granted flexibility for signage through the planned infill development process procedure, excuse me. Whereas it does not say that in your older procedures for planned infill development. So that's something where I'm actually looking for policy direction from the commission. My staff's recommendation is to not permit flexibility for signage unless it's part of a greater planned infill development project. But my recommendation is not to allow planned infill development as kind of a variance process for signage. I don't think that's what it's intended for. Additionally, in the sign ordinance, we do have a specific type of creative sign that would enable some unique ideas in the downtown area. So I feel that between that and the flexibility we do have in the PID for bigger developments, I feel that we're well covered. But I thought that is kind of a policy question, so I wanted to bring that to your attention.
Any questions? Commissioners? Comments? Hearing none. Are there any people in the audience that wish to speak on this issue at this time? Seeing and hearing none, then I would close the public hearing and move on to item 12.2, which is again, consider amending section 23.811 pertaining to permitted sign rules in planned infill development districts. Is there a motion?
So moved.
There's a motion and a second.
Second.
And is there any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none. All those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Item number 13 is a public hearing, review, and possible recommendation. City of Delavan. 13.1 is a public hearing on a request to amend section 24.903, parent 6, parent C, pertaining to amendment of the official zoning map to require 2/3 majority vote for down zoning and to provide a definition of down zoning in conformance with state statutes. Again, applicant, City of Delavan. And with that, I will open the public hearing.
This is another example of the state kind of taking away local control on certain issues. Basically, the state statutes now require that a 2/3 majority vote by your council when you're doing something considered down zoning. The state provides a definition for down zoning, which we have copied into our ordinance. I don't think it's a crystal clear definition for down zoning either, so in my opinion, this is kind of a frustrating state law. Basically, I think the intention here by the state was to protect property rights and really require basically a supermajority vote for zoning actions that would be perceived as taking away property rights. So a downzoning, an obvious example of downzoning would be something zoned heavy industrial, and now we're gonna zone it single family. I think we all agree that would be a downzoning. In other situations, it's not quite so crystal clear. So in any case, it's our recommendation to put this into your code. And then whenever there's any doubt about whether something's a downzoning, we encourage you to try to seek that supermajority vote if possible. Obviously, it's not always gonna be the case, but just to have your T's crossed and I's dotted, that's something we could encourage, I guess, or be aware of probably, and have the city attorney be aware of that too.
Thank you. Yes. Sounds good. Any questions or comments regarding this? If not, are there any citizens in attendance that wish to speak on this issue at this time? Seeing and hearing none, with that, I would close the public hearing and move on to item 13.2, which is consider amending section 24.903, parent 6, parent C, to amend the official zoning map to require a 2/3 majority vote for down zoning and to provide a definition of down zoning in conformance with state statutes. So moved. There's a motion
Second.
and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Item number 14 is a public hearing to review and possible recommendation. City of Delavan. 14.1 is a public hearing on a request to amend section 24.910, parent 3, parent C, pertaining to the procedures for applying for a variance and the definition of unnecessary hardship as the qualifying factor for determination of variance approval. Again, applicant, City of Delavan. With that, I would open the public hearing.
So this is incorporating the state's definition of variance, which gives you more ability to deny a variance should you wish to do so. It basically clarifies that the burden of proof is on the applicant to show that a literal enforcement of the zoning ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship, and clarifies that unnecessary hardship has to be unique to the property, and it's not something that was caused by the property owner. So if you design your site in such a way that you now can't develop it in the way you want to, you can't just come to the city for a variance if that was a self-created hardship. So I think the city has been following these variance criteria all along, but having something to point to in your code, I think, will help make it easier if you ever do have to deny a variance.
Any questions for Jack? If not, are there any citizens in attendance that wish to speak at this time on this issue? Seeing and hearing none, then I will close the public hearing and move on to item number 14.2, which is consider amending section 24.910, parent 3, parent C, to change the procedures for applying for a variance and the definition of an unnecessary hardship as a qualifying factor for determination of variance approval. Is there a motion?
So moved.
There's a
Second.
motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Item number 15 is a public hearing, review, possible recommendation, City of Delavan. 15.1 is a public hearing on a request to create section 24.914, parent 2, parent B, 6, pertaining to signage requirement flexibility as part of the plan infill development process. Again, applicant. With that, I would open the public hearing.
So this, I believe, is what we discussed previously, right?
Yes.
So this language basically says the PID process shall not be used as a sign variance. So just clarifying that's what this one says.
Questions, comments from commissioners? If not, are there any citizens in attendance that wish to speak on this issue at this time?
Should have recorded that.
Seeing
Should have recorded it and you could have waited.
Seeing and hearing none, we'll close the public hearing and move on to item 15.2. Consider creating section 24.914, parent 2, parent B, 6, related to signage requirement flexibility as part of the planned infill development process. Is there a motion?
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Item number 16 is public hearing, review and possible recommendations, City of Delavan. 16.1 is a public hearing on a request to amend section 24.914, parent 1, parent A, pertaining to zoning districts eligible for the development of planned infill development overlay zoning districts. Again, applicant, City of Delavan. Open the public hearing.
In your procedures section for planned infill developments, we have a list of what zoning districts may be considered for the flexibilities that come with PIDs. I did run through that list and noted that, rural holding, real estate 5, institutional and institutional residential were not included in that list, effectively meaning that if you're zoned that, you don't have ability to request planned infill development. In my opinion, it would be worth considering that option for the institutional and the institutional residential district. It would never be obligated to approve a PID for any parcel, but at least the opportunity to consider it in the future if there's a unique institutional user that did need zoning flexibility.
Any questions for Jackie, commissioners? If not, are there any citizens in attendance who wish to speak at this time on this issue? Seeing and hearing none, I would close the public hearing and move on to item 16.2. Again, consider amending section 24.914, parent 1, parent A, pertaining to zoning districts eligible for the development of planned infill development overlay zoning districts. Is there a motion?
So
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Item 17 is a public hearing, review and possible recommendations, City of Delavan. 17.1 is a public hearing on a request to amend section 23.829, parent 2, parent B, pertaining to group development signs within the downtown design overlay district, applicant City of Delavan. And I would open the public hearing.
So items 17 through 21 are all kind of pertaining to the same thing. Essentially, we have, the idea is moving the sign regulations within the downtown design overlay into the sign ordinance. That was our intention when we rewrote the sign ordinance a few years ago, and I think that change just got missed. So that way, all the sign rules are in one place rather than kind of sprinkled throughout the code. So no policy changes recommended at this time, just kind of reorganizing a little bit.
Any questions for Jackie, from commissioners? Not, are there any citizens in attendance who wish to speak on this issue at this time? Seeing, hearing none, with that I would close the public hearing and move on to item 17.2. Consider amending section 23.829, parent 2, parent D, pertaining to group development signs within the downtown design overlay district. Is there a motion?
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
are we allowed to open public hearings for items 18, 19, 20, and 21? If a motion were made to do so.
I'm sorry, say that.
If a motion were made to do so. so that we could combine 18, 19, 20, and 21 as a public hearing, and then look at 18.2, 19.2, 20.2, and 21.2 as a combined process.
Yeah, I'm all done by now, Craig.
Yeah, I don't. If there's no objection, I certainly don't. Is there any objection? All right, so with that, then, I would, no objection, go ahead and take up 18.1, 19.1, 20.1 together in a public hearing as it relates.
21.1, correct?
Oh, sorry, 21. Okay. That's one public hearing as it relates to amending, section 23.829 pertaining to sign locations and. Want me to read each one? 18.1, parent 2, parent F pertaining to approved sign material types within the downtown design overlay district. Also, a request to amend section 23.829, parent 2, parent H pertaining to sign locations. And also amend section 23.829, parent 4 pertaining to sign rehabilitation and restoration requirements, as well as a request to amend section 24.913, 11 pertaining to sign regulations in downtown design overlay district, integrating applicable sign regulations into chapter 23-8 regulations. So with that, we'll open up the public hearing on those items.
I have nothing to add to this.
Any questions of staff? Not, oh, did you, I'm sorry, Kevin.
Yep, on sign material one,
Yeah.
where we say canvas or related fabric. I imagine the intention is canvas or related fabric for, awning.
Yes.
But it says sign materials. So how do we differentiate if someone brought us a suggestion to put up a canvas sign affixed to a building?
I mean, if I were administering the code aloud, I'd probably point to the main sign ordinance, sign materials, and probably find language that would
Okay,
preclude that, but I agree that if we don't want it in there, we could take it out.
but we do want,
Could you put in there for awnings and overhangs?
We could do that. We also have, it says such as in here as well, so if we took it out,
I'm not saying, I just think it needs to be clarified, we do need to provide it. I
putting on.
have another question about sign location, since we're doing these all together. Sign location, it says, in the edited portion, wall signs, canopy signs, and projecting signs shall not be located on any portion of upper stories, right? So the B and Bradley is now illegal, except it's grandfathered. And any attempt to put a theater marquee blade sign in front of a theater building would now be illegal. Is that really what we want to do?
I think I have to look in the ordinance, I think
This is the ordinance.
well, I think the blade sign, what you're describing is considered a blade sign. So this says wall sign, canopies,
It
projecting.
says projecting sign. A blade sign.
So the sign ordinance, I believe we define projecting sign and delayed sign as two different actual types. It's a little pedantic.
How do you define the Bradley sign?
I'm not familiar with that one. Can anybody?
It looks like this, and it goes all the way up, probably the third story, goes all the way up, and it's got two giant B's on it.
And it says.
Not the
Bradley
flying
on the
kind,
sign.
the letter kind.
I would guess it's already a non-conforming sign without,
But I know that when the theater comes, they're gonna wanna put something.
Yeah.
I think it wants to stay wishing star, I don't know, I think if he has something similar
Right.
that would be mounted.
so I'll partially answer that. So we have, in our sign ordinance, we have provisions for creative signs that I mentioned before that allows for, you can have a bigger sign or a taller sign using different materials that are outside of the ordinance with special review by the city. So if the theater or someone comes in with a creative sign like that, that would be intended to address that.
So there's actually quite a few businesses in the downtown that have signs that are on the second story. Old Wisco's got it on the side that we just discussed earlier up top by BP, and then the antique store has stuff in their windows above the first floor. There's a lot. I think that I wouldn't agree with this ordinance.
So this is currently the language that you have, but
Yeah.
you could strike it.
Right. So my question is, in moving, and in addition, to clarify this, in addition to moving the downtown historical sign ordinances into the sign ordinance, does that mean, so what you referenced is a blade sign isn't in the downtown sign district? I mean, downtown district sign ordinance, it's in the general sign ordinance. So are you implying that anything that's in the general sign ordinance becomes applicable downtown?
No.
Cause, I mean, cause that was your workaround, so.
All we're doing is bringing in the rules that
I-
have sprinkled in.
And
into
as
the
you
sign
pointed out
ordinance.
before, many of them were wrong before, so now's the chance to get them right, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right now, all the signs in the downtown are subject to their central business zoning district, plus any of these rules, all these rules that we're bringing in from the overlay. So your question about whether all the rules that apply citywide, would those now apply in the downtown? That's not changing.
Okay, but, so your exception to use the blade ordinance definition doesn't work.
What do we have right now that gives us flexibility over the downtown?
Can you look that up? So you're referring to the
Well,
creative
the
signage?
answer is, neglect across time has been generally the practice that's gotten us some of the signs that don't conform. Like signs that have too many colors, signs that are backlit.
Signs that just weren't enforced.
Right. So creating an environment, I think, where we know we're gonna have stuff that's gonna be in conflict, doesn't make sense to me. I would like us to clarify the canvas or related fabric thing, and I think it's unfair of us to ask for you guys in front of us to try to write language on how we would deal with this second story issue.
I mean, and this is something we could potentially just hold open until the next meeting, and you guys could rewrite it.
Right.
Is that what you were heading
Yeah.
towards?
Yeah.
Is there a motion to?
I would move to
18.1?
take all those 19, 20, 21, or
18.1,
whatever, one, 18,
yeah,
21, and, table until a date certain, our next meeting, for further consideration.
I second that.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor of that motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Item number 22, public hearing to review and possible recommendations to the Delavan. Public hearing on a request to amend the zoning ordinance amendments so as to remove the list of amendments to the official zoning map A-1, remove the list of amendments to the zoning ordinance A-2, remove procedural checklist A-33 through A-54. Applicant, City of Delavan, and with that, I would open the public hearing.
So this is a cleanup item. There's a number of appendices in your ordinance, probably 20 years old at this point, that aren't really being used. For example, we've got one that tracks amendments to the zoning map, one that tracks amendments to the zoning map, and then a number of procedural checklists that summarize submittal requirements. They're not really being used. My experience has been when these codes go online, the appendices end up being right at the top. And so it's the first thing people see. And so if we can remove unused appendices now, so they're not distracting people, that would be my recommendation. And then we're keeping the remainders that are, I think there's one about determining arterial and collector streets, and we are keeping that one.
Questions for staff? Oh, yes, Kevin.
So on the procedural checklist thing, I mean, that's that's the operating document that an applicant actually probably uses or we use it. So what, I agree completely with getting it out of the ordinance, but how would we publish it then?
Publish in terms of,
So,
It would be set up on the website as a separate appendix. to the code.
and so you guys aren't gonna say, you're gonna maintain it one way or the other, but we just don't have to go through the process of approving it.
Codified.
Right. Okay.
Any other questions for staff, comments from commissioners? If not, are there any citizens in attendance who wish to speak on this issue at this time? Seeing and hearing none, I would close the public hearing and move on to item 22.2. Consider a request to amend the zoning ordinances so as to remove the list of amendments to the official zoning map A-1, remove the list of amendments to the zoning ordinance A-2, remove the procedural checklist A-33 through A-54. Is there a motion?
So move. Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Item number 23, old business 23.1. Consider a planned infill development amendment to the official zoning map for a step 3 general development plan GDP for the former Pick and Save building at 207 South Wright Street, tax parcel XA45 27-2 to allow for an expansion of indoor storage land use and the development of out parcels in the business regional BR zoning district with a wellhead protection overlay. Applicant Ryan Fisher for Fisher Consulting LLC. This is again continued from both the March 6th and the April 3rd, 2023 Planning Commission meetings. We've got obviously your agenda report. Any questions, comments? Staff? That's several suggested motions. Is there, if there's no questions, comments, I would entertain. Oh, yes, Kevin.
So I don't know whether you want So there's so many motions, I think that if it's all right with the chair, we should maybe have discussion and then talk
You want-
instead of. So, out of our minutes, we said, we thought that it might be good to have, the motion to approve the expansion of the self-storage use, knowing for sure that the Dollar Tree was executing a lease on the space. And, as it pertained to the second motion that we had, evidence of the commercial viability of the outlot facing Hobbs Drive, right? We received emails, from staff that the developer asked us, that provided, an answer to those questions. And as it pertains to the first one, the Dollar Tree executed lease of the space, I need to ask a question to clarify, because what we received was the developer's side of a proposed agreement with no indication that Dollar Tree was acceding to those terms and wanted to relocate. If we could get that clarified, it would be helpful.
Brian?
Yeah, Brian Fisher with Fisher Consult. The parties are communicating, which has taken some time to do. And they are working through the lease agreements now. I provided an exhibit to the space that met the requirements that Dollar Tree wanted for the amount of frontage, which actually shrunk a little bit the side tenant next to it. I think they're very close to having an agreement signed. And obviously, until that happens, they can't proceed forward with moving storage.
Okay, and so your client's perspective on getting permission with a contingency that lease gets signed, they're comfortable with that?
Yes.
The second one was, evidence of the commercial viability of the two spaces on Hobbs Drive, and there were two, actually executed letters of understanding there,
Yes,
right?
that's correct.
And so, can you give us any update on whether they're moving to document or what the status is?
Yes, my update is that if, assuming we can move forward tonight, there's every indication we would come back with a revised CSM with, cross-access and parking easements put in place. And we would be coming with a PIP for lot 2 for that building and the 2 tenants.
And then, and this is just a market question. What is your take on why what's been described as non-attractive retail in the center to the same tenants is attractive in that out parcel? Because one of the justifications for expanding the storage has been that there just isn't retail demand for the center space.
Correct. So I think the reason why that's an attractive space specifically for that tenant is it's a
Tenants.
destination, well, tenants, okay. I think putting a laundromat into the center space would be a bit challenging, where it would be a little bit easier to do it in a new building. And that can work because you've got the partner tenant that's fireworks, that's a destination location. And they're very seasonal, so there's a time of year where they get busy, which is why we're proposing the idea of a drive-through. I did work on another fireworks facility in Juneau, and they needed that. They liked to have the ability during the bulk or busy season for people to have their orders, drive up and get out of there. So it's a very specific period of time where they're busy, and have it, have people park and then walk across and get into the building to buy their fireworks, makes it a little more difficult. That's why they prefer to have that out space.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I think at the last meeting, you also mentioned that you were going to provide us a letter saying that you weren't going to expand any further than you already requested.
We can add that, I mean, you can make that a condition, and we'll put that letter in, that's, I've got assurances that we have no intention to go any further.
And then I have a question on your document that you sent us, so it's kind of a site plan.
Correct.
And, so I'm assuming that we have a new tenant here next to the dollar store that's currently in the old Summerland building, and it takes up that whole frontage.
No, that tenant has been sharing space next to the office of the Cube Smart. And they want they want a larger space next to fill in that old Slumberland space, the space that's not gonna be occupied by Dollar Tree.
And this space over here is what? To the west of this space
Oh.
right here.
That's just a portion of the sporting goods store.
And I noticed there's no docking or on here for Dollar Tree.
They don't have a dock now. They don't use a dock now.
Originally, you said you were going to provide docking for them.
That was never an intention.
That's all the question.
Okay. Thank you, Bruce. Any other?
I got one
Yes,
more
Kevin.
question concerning that same, outline or.
Exhibit, yeah.
Yeah, so, previously, you guys had proposed that behind the new tenant and the relocated Dollar Tree, there was an L-shaped new storage. It's what I marked in this orange. Okay,
That's correct.
and then, so this has changed now.
It's squared off now, correct.
So, and so there's now access, and this is apparently the shared
Common,
bathrooms
yes.
that are referenced in the Dollar Tree agreement,
That's
okay?
correct.
My question is, there's no entrance identified to the future self-storage.
Right, this is just this is just the GDP. When we come back with the PIP, we'll dive into those details. But yeah, they would come in through, there's I believe a 10x10 door and a 6Y7 2 high door, double door now. That gains access to that common hall, and then we would just have then a secure door to get into the storage space.
That's not shown.
Not yet. no.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Any other questions, comments?
So, and you're behind I'm sorry,
No, you're fine.
the storage behind the current retail stops at
At the Dunham Sporting Goods store.
At Dunham Sports.
So
There was a suggestion that.
I have one more question on suggestion motion 3, which I asked the last time. Right, and I don't even understand why that motion would be in our packet, right, which is. We don't have any. It shouldn't be up to us or the common council if developer wants to move a tenant from one portion of a center to a different portion of a center.
I agree. I assume that's in there because under his previous agreement, he said they would build a new store for him in the outlot. And now they are moving him to an existing location inside the center.
I'm sorry, Bruce, because I thought that was covered in 4. I mean, excuse me, 5. Wasn't it? That we were gonna,
Well,
Remove the
it just removes the building.
right,
as we talked
okay,
about.
all right, got it.
Any other questions? We need to run through all the other suggested potential motions or any other questions on those that haven't been addressed at this time? Yes, Jack.
I just wanted to note that one of our conditions of approval was to require the applicant to put a loading dock in for Dollar Tree.
That's what I thought.
That's exactly.
That's what I just asked, yeah.
Exactly, so just wanted to clarify that is still in the staff report, so if you intend to carry that forward as a condition, I just want to make sure.
They don't need a loading dock.
And, but did you have I'm sorry.
Yes.
Did you have a reference about, condition that this would be the full extent of the,
Yeah, I'm sure.
of the storage facility?
Let's find out.
Over time.
Maybe staff could just share with the commission and, as a refresher, reminder, what have you, as to why it was put in, why we were suggesting that under the conditions. I think that might be helpful.
If it's the decision by the Dollar Tree that they don't want, that they want to go into that place, and it's their decision if they want to have a loading dock or not, that's their decision. I don't think that we should be placing that requirement onto them to do that if they don't want it.
I agree and disagree. I agree that, if they want a loading dock, that, one should be put in.
Well, they can go wherever they want.
What's that?
They can go to another building then. All I'm saying is I don't think the government, us, should be dictating that in a private business. So if the Dollar Tree really wants a loading dock and they don't have one to provide, they can go to a different business, different company, different place. I know I don't want to lose businesses in Delavan, but that's what it is. I mean, there's plenty of other places that have loading docks, I think, in the city, that if they really want a loading dock, they can have one. I just don't think it's the government's place to dictate that.
Well, if I could make a quick comment there. You notice on your exhibit, behind the very east end, behind the storage, there's a large, bar. That's a 30-foot common area now that ends at a dock-high loading dock. We can make it work. I mean, we'd have to carve into the storage, but if Dollar Tree came back and absolutely insisted, which they haven't, that they want a loading dock, there's one right there. We'll make it work without having to go to the trouble of putting it in. But the very north end of that bar is a loading dock. They elevated, ramped up to that location.
Jackie, were you going before the petitioner had made a comment? Were you prepared to?
I was prepared to run us through our conditions. I wasn't sure if that's where you're going with.
Well, I mean, you can.
And I guess I could answer the question previously. This memo was drafted before the applicant offered to submit a letter kind of affirming that they wouldn't creep any further with the indoor storage. So if we, I think that letter would be binding, but if we also wanted to add that to this, it'd probably be a good idea. If that was something that the commission wishes to do.
I think absolutely. That's my opinion. I've been
I
asking
don't think
about
so, but that's just me, so.
No, I get it.
Well, I'm not in favor of adding any more storage at all.
So, what is the commission's pleasure? You want to have Seth run through each of the?
Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah.
So I will take these in the order that they appear in the staff report. Would you like me to just read the suggested motion? Would that be appropriate?
Yeah.
So suggested motion number 1 would be move to recommend the common council approval of the GDP amendment to approve the proposed expansion of the indoor self-storage land use CubeSmart further south and behind 2 retail spaces, subject to the requirements of the submitted application, subject to the requirements of the general zoning ordinance as modified by the approved items of zoning flexibility, and subject to the list of conditions identified by city staff, planning commission, and the common council.
Can I ask one question about that right before you go on any further? When you say behind 2 retail, retail spaces, I'm assuming you're talking about the new tenant spaces.
Correct. Perhaps you could clarify, it should be as depicted in their submitted site plan.
Sorry for interrupting. Go ahead.
Should I go to the second motion now, or did people want to discuss?
Yeah, let's take. Move on to the second.
Second motion, motion to recommend common council approval of the GDP amendment to approve the proposed arrangement of the two future out parcels, and allow the second driveway onto Wright Street to remain in place. Should I go on to motion 3? Move to recommend the common council approve approval of the GDP amendment to approve the relocation of the retail tenant Dollar Tree from its current location in the multi-tenant building into the front 2/3 of the former Slumberland space. Motion 4, yeah.
And to Bruce's point, aren't we really approving the future location of the Dollar Tree from the proposed outlot location to the, right?
If we're changing.
Because the GDP called for the Dollar Tree, we're changing the GDP, not the present condition, right? So it's moving, providing allowance for the Dollar Tree, proposed Dollar Tree location in what is now lot 3 to the center. Which is another reason why I still don't believe it should be in there, but that, I understand what.
All right, motion 4 would be to move to recommend common council approval of the GDP amendment to remove the previously approved building addition on the rear of the property.
So importantly, this was to say, we're gonna give up storage and construction behind the existing Cube Smart. Right?
Mhm.
Yep.
Yep, precisely. And then motion 5, related to motion 3, is to move to recommend common council approval of the GDP amendment to remove the previously approved freestanding retail building on Wright Street. So I'll just clarify too, in the list of conditions below, we're only approving what I've just run through in those amendments, or those motions, excuse me. And so, we're just, motion 5 is just removing previously approved freestanding retail building on Wright Street for now, and then they would come in with plans for new buildings in a future round of approval. We're not approving new buildings at this time, even though they are appearing on the site. Does that make any sense?
And we're not approving the subdivision, I mean,
We're approving the concept of the outlots, and then they do need to go through the CSN process to actually create those lots.
okay,
This would also get rid of all the previous obligations that are in place, correct?
Well, we are carrying forward, I think the applicant has agreed to meet those things that were outstanding from previous approvals.
except for
Except for the
the
heading.
Wright Street access, right?
As
Because
well
that's
as the
changing.
building
And as well as
expansion.
the storage in the back.
Because the building expansion was designed to facilitate the increased storage. And that was just simply ignored in favor of, well, we're gonna move forward and take up this extra space, which is no longer being utilized from other tenants, which was the purpose for the previous council putting that in place. Giving up the idea of prime real estate in terms of commercial space was not something that the previous council wanted to do. They were very reluctant to pass that. So the idea of giving a pass just because now it's a totally different council, that doesn't sit well with me at all.
Any other questions on the various different suggested motions?
Well, first of all, the conditions that are in here, of course, property shall add a loading dock for the new Dollar Tree location to be approved by the fire department. You know, that should be, they should add a loading dock if Dollar Tree requests one, not force them to put one in there. But I don't want them to use it as a tool to kick Dollar Tree out, and that's my concern. I also think the conditions should be, that they provide a letter that they will not expand any further. And also that they get, an agreement with Dollar Tree to move to a new multi-tenant building.
Could you repeat the last one, please?
So what's that?
Could you repeat that second?
Oh, that they get a signed agreement new signed lease agreement with Dollar Tree to move to the new tenant building. I mean, they have a proposal on here, but they haven't said they're gonna go.
Well,
My
they're moving
concern
the
is-
multi-tenant building, they're moving to the
Well,
inline space.
My concern all along is that, I think that Q-Smart overall design is to put the whole shopping center into storage space, and storage space in that location all the way down is a poor use for a commercial, for a building that's sitting in one of the prime spots still in Delavan, regardless of what they say.
And, right,
And when you
I would-
deteriorate more storage away from retail, it diminishes the success of those retail businesses, because you're decreasing foot traffic. And laundromats and places do not provide either of those two, and that's why it could go behind the building versus on Wright Street. Just a statement.
No, and I would just remind, because I know, I would just remind the commissioners, and I know we had a lot of discussion again, both in the month of March and then again, or, March, that one of the things that came up in March, I had asked, what your thoughts were on, appraisal values of a retail building. You thought storage would be more, I guess.
Higher rent per square foot.
Yeah, well, and then I had asked at that meeting, and we later confirmed from our own city assessor that that's not the case at all, that it actually would be a lower assessment, bringing the value down, to Bruce's point, that. So I think, I know, Chris, you weren't here for some of that discussion, so I just wanted to remind everyone here that I think that's important too, and then I don't know that it matters one way or another, but that was part of some of the discussion. There was a lot of discussion, we had a lot of.
Yeah, and I will also just comment, I think assessed value versus what income tax or what sales tax comes in from self-storage. I think that was the point I was pointing out. You want a sales tax that comes in from renting a lot of lockers versus a smaller tenant space or a tenant space, selling dollar items. Assessed value, I'm not gonna argue assessed value, I wouldn't know that answer, but my point was the sales tax.
Overall tax revenue.
Correct.
Yeah, but sales tax revenue or increase or decrease, you gotta remember that, planning commission is the viability of the city of Delavan, not necessarily because storage gives us more sales tax, it's better for that piece of property, it's not relevant.
The idea,
Oh, go ahead, no,
the idea that sales tax is the only thing that the city is interested in, or property tax, that doesn't make any sense for this particular commission.
I
We
just mentioned it.
I just mentioned it, I'm not saying that's the reason to do it.
I understand that, but
Okay.
I'm also bringing up, we just previously talked about the value for residents in having a setback that allows for a fence to be put in place, because there's value derived in the community. And that's something that's important. We have to continue to maintain value for the community in general, which is why I don't feel that storage is the best reason or the best thing that we could put in prime real estate for retail. If we're not driving up the quality, what are we doing?
Well, again, if you look at this project as a whole, we are driving up the quality by adding 2 outlots with one building that's got the LOIs to start construction, once this gets approved. So I think that we are adding to the quality. That'd be my opinion.
Kevin.
So I have a question for staff. Have you guys, consulted with the developer concerning mixed outcomes to 1 and 5? So like, let's say the board, the commission chose to deny 1 and 2, deny 3, deny 4, and deny five, that's basically the old belt, right? Have you talked about an outcome where, the board denied one, denied two, approved three? And, denied four and, approved five?
I'd say we haven't run scenarios necessarily, but, you know, it is within the plan commission's purview to approve whatever they deem is appropriate.
Well, because my point is, the way these motions are set, we could actually decrease the permitted right from the old GBP.
It has to be an all or nothing.
Huh? Sure we could.
If we stripped out four or we approved four, no longer would they be able to build.
On the back, and if we took five away, they'd no longer be able to build the outlot in front.
The reason why these were initially split was because the motion as a whole didn't receive any motion to move forward.
But my point is, this mixed motion process can result in, a denial of previously granted GDP rights.
Well, I think it was a suggested motions, I mean, we could come up.
No, but
Yes.
I asked a specific question, if we talked to the developer about this approach.
No.
Okay.
Anyone care to take a crack at this and suggest some sort of a motion? Doesn't have to be one of these suggested ones.
I have another question.
Okay.
Um, I'm just looking again at the, documents you sent, for the Dollar Tree and for the fireworks place. And it would appear to me that, Dollar Tree is prepared to sign an agreement roughly equivalent to what the lead outlot agreement is from the fireworks store in terms of dollars. And we were told previously that Dollar Tree didn't want to proceed with moving to the outlot building because of financial reasons. But they appear to be comfortable moving internally in the center for the same dollars. I don't understand that.
Well, I think initially, we talked in 2020, now we're in 2023.
No, I'm comparing the leases between the fireworks place and Dollar Tree for freestanding spaces.
Dollar Tree did, for whatever reasons, including if it was financial or otherwise, chose not to go into an outlot. And they're now entertaining moving over to this space. That's all I can.
Okay, thank you.
Just one more thing I'll say, I think,
I should have had you come up to the podium, it just
I'm sorry.
picks up.
I think the importance to motion one, if motion one isn't approved, then nothing's gonna happen on the site. Yeah, I mean, I think it's what it comes down to. If you approve motion one, I think everything else falls into place. If not, the old GDP is in place, and I don't think anything's ever gonna happen. I think these guys are gonna lose interest.
I'll make a motion that we go with motion one then.
There's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Yes.
So again, I have to go back to the idea that this was originally put in place to preserve retail space that's critical to the growth of Delavan as a city as a whole. Putting more storage in this particular area doesn't do that. Having a GDP that allowed for that in the past, that's one thing. That's a decision that the previous council decided to make, and that's a decision that I would be comfortable upholding. But adding any additional space in prime real estate within the city, I can't support that at all. It doesn't make sense from a growth perspective for the city. It doesn't make sense for any other aspect that provides value to the residents of this community that utilize or rely on retail space in order to live their lives. The idea of having storage as a resource for community members of this city doesn't mean that it has to go in this particular spot. We can't grow prime retail space out of thin air. Storage can be put in multiple other locations and venues. I can't support this at all.
Yes, Ken.
So I come back to intentions and conversations I've heard from the developer related to this space, okay? And, the original intention and the original, justification for the space was that there wasn't retail demand, for, space like the old Pick and Save. And so consequently, we needed to look at other, uses. And I believe very much in a capitalistic environment, there's creative destruction, and some places get old, they have to have a new use, right? I think that this process, as arduous as it has been, has demonstrated that the claims by the applicant that there's not demand for retail in that area is not evidenced by the marketplace they themselves have established. And by that, I would argue the applicant directly in March noted that he felt that this area was disadvantaged to, for example, the Shopco Center, as we would call it in the old Delavan, or the future Meyer Center. And so it was very difficult to lease to retail use, okay? And so that's why he had to expand the storage activity. Then, as we pushed back against that, we were offered incentives, the incentives being 2 outlets instead of the 1 outlets instead of the 1 that had already been proposed, and a relocation. And in each of those instances, the developer has been able to present to us retailers or service businesses that have demonstrated that there is appeal to this area. The answers about why they want to be in outlets versus in line, I don't find compelling. The lease terms between Dollar Tree's relocation and what they're charging in terms of outlet square footage for other retailers is roughly equivalent. So I'm having a hard time believing or accepting a justification for increased storage in that area as being a substitute for a lack of retail demand. And finally, I come back to the organization, and the organization, as quoted in the Syracuse newspaper where the organization is from, the founder of the organization, Ted Filer, who buys larger buildings than are And then our Pick and Save at Kmart Center, who's converting freestanding units in malls, okay, so Bontons and stuff like that, says owners are somewhat reluctant at first to sell their big box store stand because they still have hopes for retail revivals, but they eventually see the light. Well, they've demonstrated there's a potential for retail revival here. We don't have to see the light. He says, eventually, I think everybody comes around to the fact that vacant buildings are an eyesore. I don't think anyone ever disputed that fact, but they've demonstrated that these buildings don't have to be vacant. They've demonstrated that there is retail demand for it. And he says specifically, though self-storage doesn't generate the traffic in terms of employment or customers, it's a viable business. The building will never suffer vacancy, burned out light bulbs, broken curbstones, or smashed glass. That will never be the case with the Bon-Ton space he's doing there. And it had all those years. And so if the justification for it is it's the next best to worst case, right? To convert it to storage, I don't think that's a good justification. And I was, as a member of the Plan Commission, when this was approved before, sympathetic to hearing that we probably didn't have retail demand there, and so we need to create storage. At this point, I don't think we need to expand that storage. I don't think that, I think that there are economic reasons the developer wants that storage expanded and they want to add the outlots. But that's cool. I think the reason shouldn't be to eliminate retail. Our action shouldn't be to eliminate retail viability in that center. And so I'm gonna oppose motion 1.
Any other further discussion? We've had a lot, as I said, over the last couple months, and including here this evening. So, there has been a motion and a second. All those in favor of?
Could you repeat the motion?
Yes. Clerk
Was made.
It was motion 1.
Motion 1, okay.
Yep. All those in, everyone clear on the motion? All those in favor of motion 1, signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Nay.
Aye. Motion fails. Six. We'll move on to item number 24, update on building and zoning related matters.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the building and zoning department's pretty busy these days. We've got,
Chief, can you let him know he might have forgotten his jacket?
Brian.
Brian.
I think he gets paid by the hour.
So as I was saying, the building and zoning department's pretty busy these days. We have quite a few new single family homes that are filling in over on Tamarack and Evergreen, and then also over in Arbor Ridge and the new Harbor Club. And most of you have probably seen the new Qdoba and Noodles and Company has been starting to build their construction of the shell over there. And we also have the Teronomy working on they started the 177 unit apartment building. And they've also started digging on Autumn Drive for the 2 4 units and the 1 duplex that's gonna be going in over there. And those are the major projects that I'm working on right now. I don't know if any of you have any specific questions for me.
With Taurami, are they putting in provisions to provide sound dampening or soundproofing for the new project?
The Hobbs Drive project. Do you know, was that included in any of the stuff that they?
It was not included in they're working on a GDP submittal, but I did let them know that that was of interest to the commission and that they should expect to include that in their PIP.
I'm not sure what that looks like in terms of decibel levels, but maybe we could look at other cities that have airports and use some of those metrics in order to determine something.
I did talk to some folks in my office about it. They said it tends to come down to the type of insulation that's used and the type of windows that are used to minimize the amount of trespass sound.
Insulation is one component of soundproofing, but it is not soundproofing. They're very different, and I can speak to that from a construction standpoint.
You probably know more than I do.
Any other questions as it relates to update?
Mr. Chairman, T, my request for the documentation on the previous council's ratio of rental to single-family homes. Where is it, status of that?
I don't have that information. I know, I did, speak with Chris Phillips. He's a realtor in the city of Delavan here. And, he said he was gonna look to see if he had some information. I know that Mark had said they did like this, when was the last study that we had that showed that, you know?
That was back when Joe Messler was here, so it was quite a while ago.
Yeah, but I know that, Chris Phillips said he was gonna see if he had any information that he could give to me.
So you're suggesting that there is no, that was never memorialized, this ratio,
As of today, or,
well, by the previous council? There was never any statute put in place, or,
It was a resolution policy.
so there was a resolution put forward and voted on?
One of those books.
Could we get a copy of that?
Well, we will look.
Kevin?
When we write our comprehensive plan, don't we identify the total number of rental units and single-family units and all that? I think we do. I
We
think
do that based on census data,
Right,
so we could look that up right
right.
now if that's.
I think that would be a quick way to answer Will's question.
And I'm not sure that it is. If previous council has placed in the record, had memorialized some kind of a statute or a resolution, I think that we need to be reviewing that and with regards to whether or not we are stepping outside of that proposed ratio.
Was it pre-smart growth or post-smart growth? Pre-smart growth? Okay. So, I mean, it's worth researching, but I have a feeling that any resolution related to that would have been superseded by the state's law requiring smart growth activity by planning commission. But it's,
Well, if that's the case, I would like to see that as
I
well.
agree.
Yeah.
Sounds good. There's no other, oh, you have a question?
I have a couple of things. Do we have anything in place from a planning perspective that gives us some metrics to determine maximum population density for storage so that we can set something in place? I know that other cities and municipalities are running into this problem already. They do not want any more storage coming into place. So I would like to have something that's healthy and then something that we can use as here is a good place to put these things. I understand that we have storage in place already within the city, but I don't want to run into a problem down the line for 10 years. I'd also like to see something for bed and breakfasts or B&Bs or to see what sort of tolerance the city should hold, or from a growth perspective? How much is too much? Where are good locations? How should that be developed? Is that something that should be set into a specific zoning area? All of that. And then the last thing I have, do we have any updates as to what's going on with all of these vehicles being parked on agricultural land?
We're working on that, and it's May first. Since starting from May first, I'm issuing citations for, if you're talking about the property that I believe you're talking about. Yes.
Can you explain that? Yeah, what are we talking about?
So they're presently, in the city of Delavan, ag land, where there's boats and campers and.
We basically have things that are being parked off-site from a different premise that's in a zoning district. That, number one, I guess the biggest thing would be we don't allow off-site premise parking to happen there on ag land.
I didn't know this was going on. I didn't know what was going on.
We're basically referring to the property across from Lake Lawn.
Oh, okay.
I thought they had moved all that. No?
No, it's still there. They're probably starting to move a lot of it because the boating season's coming, but there's a lot of things that are being used by Lake Lawn. One of the owners owns both sides of the street, but they're still separate entities. And we've requested for them to come in to talk to staff and to at least get, even if it was like a temporary conditional use or permission from the city to grant them the ability to be able to park over there. But most of our, we definitely wouldn't allow off-site premise parking on something. And if they were, normally if you have outside storage of anything, it's gotta be on blacktop or dust-free. And usually it would need to be enclosed. So there's a bunch of different codes that they would, if it was gonna be a full-time thing, would need to address with the city. And we've asked them to come in, discuss things, and I guess they're just too busy to come and talk to us, so.
Probably more reluctant than busy, but.
But my department's definitely given them, we've written numerous letters and given them a lot of time, and they've been, they've had stuff over there for more than 9 months. And we have development review meetings the first and third Thursday every month, and I've told them they could come to any of those. And I don't know, I just haven't heard from them really.
So is the fine per vehicle?
I believe right now we're gonna be issuing, it's a $250 fine. Right now, we're just gonna, and it can be a daily occurrence, so, in the letter that I wrote them, we basically asked them, or told them we were gonna give them till May 1st to, come and discuss things with the city so that we could at least have an agreement, and we still haven't heard from them, so there's no agreement, so, they're probably breaking more than one zoning violation, so I'll have to look at that, a little bit, but we'll at least be giving them at least this, one fine for each day, so.
Is that backdated or starting?
It probably will just start May 1st. So,
Happy May 1st.
yeah.
Any other questions, updates as it relates to building, zoning, and related materials? Not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion and second, all in favor of adjournment, signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everyone.